Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But bomb.
And action.
Sergeant Reed, my superstar panel. They're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Dewbs and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship,
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
and no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, it's 6 o'clock on a Friday evening now. It's too much emphasis on race, ironically making people more racist, especially given the divisive content being taught in schools. The government has finally announced public sector pay rises, but the army appear to be being short-changed. Why might that be? Plus, Hollywood on strike. It might not sound important, but if AI can destroy acting, is it also coming for your job? And have we given up on social mobility in the UK? Some shocking facts around educational attainment suggest that the class divide is only getting wider. All of that to come tonight on Dewbs & Co. with me, Bev Turner. But first, the latest headlines with Rory.
Thank you very much, Bev. A legal bid to challenge the decision by the Home Office to use former RAF bases to house asylum seekers has been approved by the High Court. West Lindsey District Council opposes the use of RAF Scampton in Lincolnshire. Braintree Council is challenging the use of Wethersfield Airfield in Essex. The two-day hearing began on Wednesday as the first migrants began arriving at Wethersfield. Well, former Home Secretary Priti Patel has told us here at GB News that laws cannot be disregarded.
Braintree District Council have worked incredibly hard, and all credit to them and their legal counsel for getting us to where we are with this judicial review. It's important that local people and our local councils and statutory service bodies, that their voices are heard. We have laws in place, Nationality and Borders Act, we had the new plan for immigration in place. We worked for years to get those policies in place and that legislation in place. You can't just discard it and try to supersede it with new policies.
Junior doctors in England say they're in it for the long run on day 2 of their 5-day strike. That's despite the government's offer of a 6% pay rise, which the Prime Minister says is final. The British Medical Association says more strikes are possible. They want an offer closer to the 12.4% given to junior doctors in Scotland. Hundreds of people have been attending the funeral of one of the students stabbed to death in Nottingham last month. Around 600 people were at Taunton Minster in Somerset to pay their respects to Barnaby Webber, one of the 3 people killed during those attacks. The 19-year-old was killed as he returned from a night out with fellow student Grace O'Malley Kumar. 65-year-old school caretaker Ian Coates was also stabbed to death during the attack. A man charged with their murders is due in court for a plea hearing in September. Former Manchester City footballer Benjamin Mendy has been found not guilty of rape and attempted rape at Chester Crown Court. The France international was accused of raping a 24-year-old woman at his house in Cheshire in October 2020. He was also charged with the attempted rape of a 29-year-old woman 2 years earlier. Mendy had denied both charges, saying the encounters had been consensual. Almost 1,000 workers at Gatwick Airport, including baggage handlers and check-in staff, will stage 8 days of strikes later this month. Unite Union says they're because of ongoing pay disputes. Workers will walk out for 4 days, that's from Friday the 28th of July, then again from Friday the 4th of August for another 4 days. Airlines affected include British Airways, EasyJet, Ryanair, TUI, WestJet and Wizz Air. The Department for Transport has approved plans to build a 2-mile road tunnel near Stonehenge. It's part of plans to turn the A303 into a dual carriageway. The Transport Secretary has granted a so-called development consent order, but a previous one was overturned by a High Court in 2021 after campaigners raised concerns for the UNESCO World Heritage Site. 2 British men have been sentenced for smuggling 7 Indian migrants, including women and children, into the UK in the boots of cars. One man who was stopped in Dover in 2018 has been given 3.5 years for assisting unlawful immigration. 3 Indian nationals, claiming to be Afghan Sikhs, were found in the boot of his hire car. His co-accused, who had 4 Indian nationals in his, has been jailed for 3 years and 2 months, also for assisting unlawful immigration. India's space agency has successfully launched a rocket to the moon.
3, 2, 1, 0.
The mission is aiming to land at the lunar South Pole and deploy a rover which will conduct experiments for 2 weeks. Only 3 other space agencies, thus the US, China and the former Soviet Union, have landed on the moon, but none have been to the South Pole. And at Wimbledon, defending champion Novak Djokovic has reached the men's singles final. He's beat 8th seed Jannik Sinner 6-3, 6-4, 7-6. His record equalling 46th Grand Slam semi-final earns him a record-breaking 35th final, taking him past that of Chris Evert. TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News. Now though, back to Bev.
Welcome to Dewbs & Co. This evening with me, Bev Turner, and joining me until 7, my panel. I'm delighted to say former Brexit Party MEP and CEO of First Property Group, Ben Habib, and rapper and author Zubi. I've told you both, I said on social media, they were like, do you want to sit in for Dewbs on Friday? And I was like, you know what, the kids are off school, I'm busy, there's a lot on. And they said, it's you too. And I was like, try and stop me. Try and stop me. This is going to be good. You get in touch as well this evening, won't you? gbviews@gbnews.com is the email address, or on Twitter @GBNews. Right. Now, according to a campaign group, Don't Divide Us, of which Ben Habib is part, pupils in schools are being tested on white privilege and are undergoing tests to check their unconscious bias. Don't Divide Us published their latest report, which zooms in on organisations who are promoting radical political beliefs in schools. So, Ben, this feels timely, actually. I think this is a report that needed doing, but I'm finding it quite hard to put my finger on why I think this needed doing. But tell us who the group are and why you felt this was the time was now.
So I'm merely one of a large group of people, but this effort was spearheaded by people like Claire Fox, Alka Siegel, Cuthbert, Catherine Birbal Singh. You know, they were at the forefront.
That's Britain's strictest head.
Yeah, strictest head and the most sane one, as far as I can see. She's a wonderful lady. And Don't Divide Us came in the wake of the George Floyd incident in the US, when, do you remember, they were burning, the US was on fire, and they were bringing that kind of ideology to the UK. But white privilege, which is essentially at the core of what Don't Divide Us stands against, is a theory that goes back quite a long way. It goes back to the 1970s, except it never really got traction until, in my mind, relatively recently. It's probably been gaining traction slowly in the background. But it is time we stood up to it. And the basic premise behind white privilege is that if you're white, you're privileged. And if you don't recognise that privilege and you don't recognise your unconscious bias against ethnic minorities, you're a racist.
Right.
So you're not allowed to be white without sort of acknowledging that you're prone to being a racist.
But you wouldn't argue in this country that in terms of poverty and educational attainment, and funny enough, it comes down to another couple of topics we're going to talk about later, that statistically, of course, white people earn more, do better, are more likely to be privately educated, or not?
Yeah, but there are also, a preponderance of the population is white. You know, last time I looked, I think it was about 85% of the population is white. And what you don't do in life, and Zubi and I both, have... I'm from an ethnic minority, so is Zubi. And, you know, what you don't do is equate our rights, our opportunities in life by attacking white people. What you do is create a level playing field for all, rather than inculcating division by somehow saying that Zubi and I are different to others. We're not. We're people. We've got the same aspirations, same desires in life as everyone else, and the same capabilities. The other thing that's quite interesting about white privilege is that it assumes and it promotes this theory that actually people from ethnic minorities need a helping hand.
Yeah.
It's actually quite racist in itself.
Was there a time, Zubi, when we did need to have this conversation, but maybe we've gone into a more post-racial world now?
There was probably a time, but it was also probably before I was born.
Wow. Okay.
You know, the fact that these conversations are happening more now around racism and what I would call racialism, a lot of it has been imported from the USA, that's for sure. And And it's happening all across the West. So these same conversations and concerns that are happening right here and these type of investigations, the exact same things happening all across the USA, but with even more fervor. It's happening in Canada, it's happening in Australia. Basically, any Western, particularly English-speaking Anglosphere country, these conversations are going on. And I think that the demand for racism has been much higher than the supply for a long time.
I see what you mean, but who's vested in that then? Who has a vested interest in there being more racism than there really is?
People who profit from it.
Which is who?
There are organizations, there are groups, there are politicians, there are activists whose entire livelihood and reason for being would cease to exist if everyone just said, actually, you know what, we all agree that racism is bad. We also agree that more than pretty much any other part of the world or any other time in human history, we've made more progress in combating it, which was necessary in the past and, you know, and still is as we go on. But you don't combat racism with more racism.
But there'll be black guys watching this at home now who are like, hang on a minute, Zuby. You, like me, you will have been stopped more for knife crime. You might have not been prioritised for certain jobs. Like, you might have found yourself on the receiving end of insults on the street or threats from people.
Yeah.
So how do you not experience that? Or if you do you just handle it differently?
I honestly have not experienced it. And through the nature of what I've done, I've actually met hundreds of thousands of people in the UK. Not exaggerating. I used to sell my CDs on the street and in shopping centers. I did that for over a decade. I have met hundreds of thousands of people in this country. I've traveled the world a lot. And I think I can categorically and fairly say that the UK is one of the least racist countries in the entire world.
Oh, I think that's
by quite a significant margin.
Absolutely.
No doubt about it. We have to look at our government, look at our cabinet, look at our Prime Minister.
Exactly. Now, I'll say that, and someone will go and say, oh, he said racism doesn't exist. No, I'm not saying racism doesn't exist. It exists in every single country. It's a part of the human sin of, you know, bias and elements of tribalism.
Right?
Yeah. Tribalism in itself is not always inherently bad, but it can go off in bad ways.
Just white people who are
no,
racist.
not at all. No, not at all. So these sort of ideas, these radical ideas, which, you know, the term cultural Marxism has been sort of overused, but this is really what it is. Rather than looking at the class division, this is now splitting it across racial lines and trying to get and set people at each other's throats based on their skin color, their ethnic background, and so on. And ultimately, as Ben's already said, I mean, number one, many aspects of it are simply not true. And then secondly, it's not helpful, right? No one ever explains, okay, if you're going to go and you're going to sit a bunch of children down and you're going to brainwash them with this nonsense, who is this helping? How is this going to help the black or brown kids? How is this going to help the white kids? How is this going to help anyone? It's just going to make them look at each other with suspicion, harbor resentment, and that is the kind of thing that will actually cause real racism.
Okay, and I'm very much playing devil's advocate here because I pretty much agree with everything that you're saying. But in order to have a good debate on this, I think it's important. I'm putting myself in the shoes of people that I would know who would say, well, hang on a minute, my son won't have the same opportunities because they are black or Indian, Asian, as your white son will.
I think this panel is probably not the best example for, you know, people's skin color holding them back, because
we've done all right.
Yeah, I mean, you've got an Oxford and a Cambridge graduate, and both entrepreneurs and business owners. I mean,
But I think we're testimony to the fact that the United Kingdom is not institutionally racist. Actually, when I was brought up, and I welcome your view on this, Zuby, and yours, Beverly, I was taught everyone is equal.
Yes.
And that is a fundamental foundation from which you can advance. The minute you say black lives matter more than white lives, you've put a racial division down the middle of society.
But if we just consider where this came from, where this, as you would describe it, as reverse racism, or racism against white people came from, it stemmed from positive discrimination, did it not?
Yeah.
So quotas in the workplace.
Diversity and inclusion. These are bad things.
But did they not start out with good intentions?
Well, I think it's more sinister than that. I think Zuby's absolutely right that there are vested interests, but there's a political ideology, and it's quite a sinister one. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but there is a perpetual tug of war between democracy and those that govern us. And those that govern us want to take power away. And as you know, I'm a Brexiteer.
Yeah.
And one of the mechanisms by which our governing class strip the people of their democratic rights is by handing power over to independent bodies, sometimes domestically, sometimes supranationally. And the EU is a really good example. And if you believe in things like supranational bodies, the pooling of sovereignty, you can achieve your aim much more easily if you undermine national identity.
Yes.
And the way you undermine... Sorry, it's
go
quite
on.
complex, but the way you undermine national identity, essentially, is to get citizens of a nation to lose their self-confidence.
Yes.
So that's why you see an attack on white people in this country. You see, if you're at school, you're taught, and if you're white, that actually your forefathers were slave traders, that you should be ashamed of the British Empire, that those who guaranteed our freedom by fighting Nazi Germany were actually no more than white supremacists, that you are entitled, you should be ashamed of that entitlement. They undermine our language as well. They promote... ostensibly promote minority interest to the detriment of the majority by making you sexually phobic if you don't sign up to their LGBTQ plus agenda. You know, it's multifaceted, this attack.
And yet you think it has an ideological globalist...
It does.
Because you know what's so interesting, Ben?
Yeah.
Hearing you say the word self-confidence, because when you were talking then, Zubi, about the fact that you feel you never experienced overt racism, I'm looking at it and thinking, why? And what I'm seeing is self-confidence.
Yeah.
Like nothing but self-confidence. And I wonder whether that, because you give off this energy, that means you don't cast yourself as a victim and therefore you don't become a victim.
Look, I mean, you get idiots on the internet who might, send random stuff to you behind anonymous profiles, but who cares? What impediment is that to my life?
That's right.
The truth is, with all of these situations, and it doesn't matter whether you're talking about racism, you're talking about sexism, you're talking about any of the phobias and isms, all these things that people are massively concerned about, the best that you can do as a society and as a culture, and even under the law, is treat everybody fairly. That's the best that you can do. Not set different standards for people, not coddle some people and tell some people they're victims, tell other people they're oppressors. Just treat everybody equally and fairly. That's it. Going back to Martin Luther King Jr., content of character.
These organisations that you've identified in this report, Ben, of who are working in schools, they don't see that, and they obviously want there to be this sort of division. And the idea of subconscious or unconscious bias, they would say...
that's just unbelievable.
You can't know.
Even if you don't feel it, you're basically biased.
Exactly. And we can't prove it.
No.
It's sort of Kafkaesque, isn't it, in a way? Like, we can't prove to you that you're inherently racist. Just believe us when we tell you that you are.
I mean, people accuse me of being a racist. And I said, well, I'm half Pakistani. And they go, yeah, but you're really white. And I go, no, I'm really not. I'm half-half. And they can't get it. They think Suella Braverman's racist. She's not racist just because she wants to stop illegal crossings of the channel.
Can I bring an important point here as well? Is because what's going on here is what I call label inflation. And this is when you call everything and everybody a racist or a white supremacist or a sexist or whatever it is. These terms are devalued. They lose their meaning if you just throw them around, put them on everything like ketchup. Then when you do have someone who is a true white supremacist or a true racist or a true Nazi or whatever, what do you now label that person? You've already called everyone else racist and everyone else far right. So if
you've actually normalized them.
Yes, you've normalized it. You've taken away the power of these words by just overusing them so much. So I think this is actually part of the long-term danger.
But what a
of
difficult,
going and calling everyone
difficult kind of tied to stem of what we're describing here. How do we start the pushback?
People need to. Sorry to jump in.
No.
People need to say no. People need to just reject these ideas. I think my personal view, because I've been involved in these conversations for several years at this point, and I find the vast majority of people agree with me, regardless of their skin color and their background. You'll get some far lefty types who do disagree, but most people are not willing to state the things that we are saying.
Yeah.
Right. Again, because they don't want to. They don't want to be called a racist, right? But it's really this simple, and I think people need to stop being so gentle with it and just say no.
Yeah.
Right? If you're a parent and your child is going to school and they're teaching your little black boy that he's a victim and white people are out to oppress him and that they're all racist or whatever, No, you need to take that up with the school. If your little white boy or girl is going to school and being told that they're somehow responsible for atrocities that happened hundreds of years ago before they were born, which they have nothing to do with, and that they should be treating their friends and their fellow students differently, and they should be seeing race, all this stuff, it's utter garbage. This is not the way we were raised. And I think we've come out very well. And I'm concerned that by creating this type of division and animosity, you're actually going to end up creating a more racist society.
And what we need to head towards, which you said, Zubi, if I can just sum it up, is an equal opportunity society, not an equal outcome society. And part of this debate, I think, comes from there's an economic aspect to all of this too, you know, creating a dependency culture, making people dependent on the state, making sure everyone has the same outcome. It's almost communism. Really what we want is equal opportunity.
Right, we've got to move on. Thanks, guys. Right, next, as public sector workers get pay rises, why are the armed forces getting so little in comparison?
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
On Mark Dolan tonight, in My Big Opinion, a top makeup brand uses bearded men in an advert for their female cosmetic products. The cancellation of women continues apace. In My Take at 10, the media elite circling the wagons to defend Hugh Edwards will be sorely disappointed. Shocking allegations remain. This story is going nowhere, not on my watch. And my newsmaker tonight is BBC Crime Watch legend Sue Cook, who weighs in on the Hugh Edwards scandal. A busy show. We're live from 9.
We did enjoy with that trail of Mark Dolan and the bearded guy getting the makeup on. You'd look good in that, Zuby. You've got the beard to match that lipstick.
Well, I am the British women's deadlift record holder still.
You're what?
I know in my weight class. So.
No.
Yeah.
You entered the women's... I did not know this about you. Tell
Really?
me.
This is 2019.
Go on.
I identified
Didn't know
as...
you were then. I only
Really?
came across you during the pandemic.
Oh, OK. Back in February 2019, I famously identified as a woman and I broke the British women's deadlift record and bench press. So if you Google UK women's deadlift record, I believe my name still comes up first thing.
Did you wear a dress?
No.
You just literally went on there dressed as a man
fully
and you
bearded.
said, I am a man.
Aren't those the rules?
Well, apparently they are the rules, but that's why you're so brilliant.
I was a trendsetter.
You missed.
And I've seen many men have done the same thing ever since, so...
Oh, I love it.
I'd get on and lose.
Inspired by you. Right, you are watching Dewbs & Co with me, Bev Turner, this evening. Ben Habib is here and also Zuby. Now, the government have announced public sector pay rises of between 5 and 7%, but the armed forces are stuck with just the 5%. So why are the army being hung out to dry? Ben, does this feel fair to you? I mean, obviously, we've got doctors, junior doctors, still wanting this ridiculous 35% pay rise. 6% is what Rishi Sunak has offered across the board. But it kind of struck me that we are neglecting our military. Is that because they can't strike?
We always neglect our military. You know, we put them in harm's way without proper equipment. We haven't spent anywhere near enough on our military as we should have done. We've consumed the peace dividend multiple times over. And if we want to be a nation that has global influence, actually, you've got to have a strong military. And it's important that we do have it. And I'm sure part of the reason that they've been underpaid, relatively speaking, is because they can't strike. There is also a reasonable reason for it, because a lot of their living comes at the cost of the state anyway, you know.
Right, accommodation.
Accommodation. I think they have subsidised meals, subsidised education, care for their children and so on. So there's a big inflationary aspect which they automatically get that other public sector workers won't necessarily get. But on the general point about our military, we are always treating them badly. We need more of them, we need better equipment, and we need to be ready for war, because only if you're ready for war will we be able to maintain the peace.
Do you think also, Zuby, I do wonder whether, when it comes to our soldiers particularly, the assumption might be, well, you know, they're young, they tend to be more working-class kind of boys. They don't, you know, they haven't got another option. They've gone to the army because they don't want to do anything else, so we'll kick them a small 5%.
Yeah, maybe so. I just think there's not much of a negotiating position. And, you know, I think in the grander scheme of these public sector pay rises, it's difficult because when it comes to politics and when it comes to the economy, people don't like to talk in these terms, but the truth is there's two things. Number one, there's always trade-offs, right? There aren't really true solutions, there are just trade-offs. Yeah. And then also that there's not an actual infinite money tree. And when you try to play the infinite money tree game, that's how you get monetary inflation, which is what is causing all of the problems to begin with. So, look, I'm not an expert in these matters, but I acknowledge the reality of the situation, and I think there's always going to be compromises, exactly where you can cut from and give to. You know, we elect people to make these decisions. But
do you think you're a young man? I noticed.
And not me.
You're quite young. It's all relative, Ben. But do you think it still appeals to young men going in the military? Like, they all just want to be Instagrammers and, you know, go and have a YouTube channel. Like, I think it's going to be increasingly hard in the next couple of decades to even find men that want to fulfil that very masculine role model.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. And the number of men, the percentage of men who are even in the physical shape to qualify, the same problem they're having actually in the USA as well. They've had to lower the bar a bit for the people who can potentially come into the military service. So, yes, I do think there's going to be a massive problem. I also think another factor is that with many of the things we're even talking about in the previous segment, another thing that's happened is younger people are not feeling as patriotic as previous generations were, right? When you constantly are
undermining the
nation you would say that's
yes, when you're constantly telling people that, you know, the country is inherently bad and all of these things, then why would you want to go into the military. So I think when they're doing some of these initiatives and they're talking in a certain way, I don't think perhaps they're not thinking long term about what the consequences of this type of messaging are on the younger generations.
And even the military are now practicing a form of racism. You know, they're practicing inclusivity and diversity and making sure they've got quotas.
Prioritising.
Prioritising certain ethnicities over white people. And actually, what do you want most out of your military? You want the best. You want the best coming forward. And the way to do that is to make them proud. You know, make them want to serve.
It's so interesting how so many issues come back to that idea of undermining the sovereignty of the individual nation.
It absolutely...
It underpins so much of what we talk about.
Absolutely, and that's why I was a Brexiteer, because we had to take back control from the EU that wishes to strip us of our democratic rights and make decisions over our heads in Brussels, not for our interests, not for the British people, but for what keeps them in office and is best for the EU. Not even for Germans, French, Italians, Spanish, Greeks, whatever. It's just for the EU. And we've got to fight this movement. And it's not just the EU. It's also the UN, the WHO, the World Bank, the IMF. They're all at it. And we've got to pull back sovereignty to the UK. We've got to be proud to be British.
So you must have watched things like the NATO meeting this week with Sunak there. What do you think when you see that? Do we still need those sorts of collaborations?
Well, we need NATO, but NATO, I'm afraid, is being hijacked. You know, when you've got the President of the United States of America who can go over Ben Wallace and choose Ursula von der Leyen, who's a failed defence minister for Germany, to be head of NATO, where you've got the United Kingdom bigging up the importance of Ukrainian sovereignty and the integrity of that country, and yet giving up Northern Ireland to the European Union, leaving it behind subject to foreign laws adjudicated by a foreign court. You know, you see this is the breakdown of Western liberal democracies, and it all comes back to an attack on the nation state. Sorry, I moved back on to where we were in the first segment. But
can I just ask you one thing, Zubi? Didn't you invent the term Jacksonate?
Yes.
It explains to people what that means. I love this.
It's from the term, any gym goer is probably familiar with the term getting jacked, which is just, you know, building up your muscles, strength training, getting fit. So during the campaign when, you know, they were pushing for people to get vaccinated, I was suggesting that people should get vaccinated, get their bodies in shape, exercise, eat well, and then they can also keep themselves and help others
and start with your own physical health.
Exactly.
Responsibility for your own physical health. That's something we don't talk about enough, isn't it? Right, thanks, guys. OK, so coming up next, will AI destroy Hollywood and other creative industries? Zubi recently went and met Elon Musk to talk about pretty much just this. See you in 2.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening, my name's Rachel Ayres and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast brought to you by the Met Office. So it's been quite an unsettled, wet and miserable end to the week, and that isn't going to change much as we go through the weekend. It's all due to this area of low pressure that's going to be pushing northeastwards across the UK, and it's going to be bringing some pretty strong winds even as we go into tonight. But that rain that we've seen through much of Friday will start to clear away towards northern Scotland, but bringing some heavier bursts for eastern areas, so there could be some localised disruption there. Elsewhere, a drier night, maybe the odd shower, but with those strong winds, temperatures still remaining in the low teens. Now looking to the start of the weekend, and that rain will start to clear away from northern Scotland. A rash of showers developing across the rest of the UK. These could be heavy and thundery, and with some particularly strong winds as well. They'll be rattling from west to east throughout the day, though we might just see the odd more slow-moving shower across parts of Scotland. But in those strong winds, it's going to continue to be feeling unseasonably cool through Saturday. Looking ahead to Sunday, though, generally the better day of the weekend for many. There will be some persistent rain for a time across western parts of Scotland and the odd shower elsewhere, but a bit more in the way of sunshine and winds starting to ease as we go south to north. But looking ahead into the new week, and it will still remain unsettled, not so much as we've seen over the weekend, with temperatures at or below average.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Dewbs and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political budgets.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Bev Turner, keeping me company this evening, former Brexit Party MEP and CEO of First Property Group, Ben Habib, and rapper and author Zuby. You have been getting in touch with us this evening. Now, I might not be quite as clever as Michelle Dewberry at opening the emails on the laptop. Sorry about this. I'd love to tell you what you're saying, but I can't do it. So we're just going to have to move on. I think, having spoken to Zuby about breaking the women's deadlifting record, we might get to see this now. Right, there he is. This is a woman. This is Zuby. She identifies as a woman. Tell us what you're doing here, Zoobs.
Pulling 230 kilo deadlift at a body weight of around 83. So that's.
You do look very feminine.
Yeah. Some people do say. It's normally the voice that gives it away.
But what about the women you stole that record from? Them,
so
Zuby?
yes, obviously I was making a point.
Yeah.
So it's crazy that was over 4.5 years ago, and it's quite amazing that the conversation about that particular issue is continuing to rage on, and it kind of just shows the absurdity of where we are.
Well, some sports have made the right decisions, haven't they?
Yeah, finally.
I think cycling and swimming as well, thanks largely in no part to the work of Sharon Davis, they have decided to allow biological females to only compete with biological females.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you say, that was 4 years ago. You were doing it as a parody of what was to come.
Yeah, because I saw the issue early on from about 2016, and I didn't expect that whole video to go viral. That thing has I don't know how many millions of people have seen that. But yeah, you know, I don't want to I don't want to distract from the main topic we're discussing.
Well.
But yeah, give women their sports back.
I bet you don't weigh as much as that barbell, do you?
I bet I don't. Nowhere near.
Nobody, honestly, nobody should.
Okay.
Nobody should.
Right. Hollywood is now joining the summer of strikes. The Screen Actors Guild and the American Federation of Television and Radio Artists will bring film and TV productions to a halt, and this is going to affect productions in the UK as well as in America. And this is all about fears that AI will be writing scripts and making actors surplus to requirement. So this is scaring the entertainment industry, scaring all of us, frankly. Zubi, should we be worried? You went to meet Elon Musk recently. How did that happen? The guy that now, of course, runs and owns Twitter.
Yeah, well, he started following me on Twitter about 6 months ago. And we were chatting, actually most days. We're chatting a lot in the DMs, and I invited him to come onto my podcast. And then eventually, when I was in the USA, we managed to work out a time, so I flew out to Twitter headquarters in San Francisco
and
sat down with him.
And that's because you have more than 1 million followers on Twitter.
I do.
Yeah.
A lot of people do, though. I don't. Wasn't just that.
Not that many people do. I mean, and just to explain what that means that there are at least 1 million, about 1.1 million, I think you've got followers, who think that Zubi is sufficiently interesting and wise that they want to hear what you've got to say every day. That sounded really derogatory, and I didn't mean it to. We know you are that person. But that's what it means, and it means that you can generate your own content, and when anything happens in the world, bang, there you are. This is what I think about it. And so so Elon Musk got in touch with you to talk about what he was doing wrong with Twitter or how he could do it differently.
Yeah, he basically said, look, anything you see wrong with Twitter or any suggestions you have, feel free to send them to me. So that was how our conversation started. But then, you know, the podcast is out now. You can listen to that, the Real Talk with Zubi podcast, episode 263.
Yeah.
It's on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, everywhere. So it's a big conversation.
Is he weird? Well, that's quite a telling pause, isn't it, Ben?
He's made a lot of money. He is weird.
He's a bit weird, isn't he?
Yeah, he's a little weird, but he's very kind. He's very humble. He's very humble. Very, very funny. Obviously smart. Yeah, I liked him. He was cool. What you see is what you get. He's not someone who was, you know, suddenly different behind the scenes.
And weren't you largely talking about intellectual property and your image rights and that kind of thing? Because that's kind of what this
honestly not so much in the podcast. We did we talked for 2 hours, so we discussed a lot of things from underpopulation to space travel to AI to how he does all the things he does, free speech, lots of different topics. But we did talk about artificial intelligence because that's a concern of mine, it's a concern of his, and a concern of millions, if not billions, of people around the world.
Should it be, Ben? I think it really should. And I cannot countenance how quickly this change has happened.
Yeah, I mean, you know, there've been a lot of scare stories around about artificial intelligence, haven't there? And, you know, part of me, being the cynic that I am, thinks that it's those who actually created the product that wish to promote the product, you know, putting the scare stories about because no news is bad news, all publicity is good publicity. I don't think you can replace the human. Perhaps this is me being too glib, but I don't think you can easily replace the human spirit in life. So many technological revolutions have taken place where we've thought that is the end of mankind as we knew it.
The steam engine, the electricity, the telephone, the television.
Absolutely.
Remember how my parents didn't want me to sit and watch TV?
Absolutely, you'll get square eyes and all the rest of it. And then the internet and emails was going to make us all redundant. I work harder now than I did when I used to have to put pen to paper. I'm forever dealing with, you know, I think our productivity's gone up. We react to technology. We obviously have to evolve. We thought video would put radio out of play and that at cinemas would be put out of play by videos. It never happened. So I think, yeah, sure, actors and the profession will be challenged. They'll have to adapt. Things won't be the same as they were. Proprietary rights become a difficult thing to enforce.
And that's effectively what the actors are particularly worried about. The idea that you could do a scene in a movie, you could read some generic script, and then with your face, they could create the entire rest of the movie, and you only get paid 1 day's work, and all the profit goes to the top. That is very much the movement of travel, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a concern for a lot of industries. And the fact that it's even a concern for the creative world and the music world, the acting world, those are actually the industries that where if you ask people about AI 5 years ago, those are the ones people thought would be the hardest
to replicate, to undermine.
Right? People,
hijack is the
I mean,
word.
I myself, I thought even when, the first AI music, it was kind of just electronic music.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, how are they going to do like rapping or singing or whatever? And that is coming along at a very scary rate.
Yeah.
So, again, like Ben said, I'm an eternal optimist. I'm a long-term optimist. However, in the short term, in the short term, I'm concerned. I just think there's going to be a lot of very, very rapid change that will affect a lot of industries and sectors and things people have been doing their whole lives.
And I think like you say, we always presume that the creative industries was the ones that were safe. I thought, oh, I'm a writer, it's fine. No one will ever be able to do the writing. There's one of the boys in the office here. He wasn't particularly good even at writing a couple of sentences of scripts. You won't mind me saying that. He's now written 2 books. He did it all on ChatGPT.
Yeah, there we go.
2 total books.
But is it good?
I don't know. I've not read them. I will read them.
The proof of the pudding will be in the eating, won't it?
I think they're good enough because there are some bad books out there written by humans.
And where will it be in 2 or 3 or 5 years?
But this is the thing. Like, what is the loss? Because there is always, with any of these, what appear to be gains, there will be a loss, and it is something about humanity and the human spirit, Ben.
Yeah, well, I think so. And you put a human, at least for the moment, up against a machine, the human wins. We think laterally.
I think it depends on what we're playing.
Depends,
I think it depends on the game.
I was going to make a very
what was
anti-EU joke, but I won't do that.
What was the year
that? Here, if you want to make that joke.
But it was. I mean, it's been a while ago now since the was it Deep Blue, the chess playing AI.
Could beat
the top few players. I mean, that was quite a while back.
Yeah, but chess is formulaic. And
now didn't they recently beat the best Go player in the world? Because Go is more complex.
I don't know. I've never heard of Go.
So look, I don't know, but I'm saying, look, if you're using AI, be nice to it.
Yeah.
Be kind to it because.
Well, the thing is, it feels to me like it's a bit like, it reminds me of the surveillance conversation. The law hasn't caught up, the legislation hasn't caught up, Parliament hasn't caught up. If you've got actors who are going out on strike because they know that the movie company currently has the right to take their face and replicate it in any way they want, then that just shows that it has moved too quickly without the legislation around it.
And it is moving rapidly, and clearly their legal advice was poor when they signed those contracts.
Yeah.
I think it's also important for people to remember that what we are seeing of AI is consumer level. So what actually exists is many years ahead of what we are seeing. That already exists.
Well, you and Elon
I know of people who are working in this space who have told me in their own words that they are terrified by some of the things that organizations they themselves are working with are already doing with it. So I think we at least need, the conversation should be happening.
It should be happening. Yeah. Well, you heard it here first, when we've all got no jobs. And remember, you heard it here first. That's cheery, isn't it? Right, we've got to take another quick break. But coming up, is the class divide now in this country bigger than ever? Yes, see you in a minute.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my new show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m, where real people get to meet those in power and hold them to account. Every week, we'll be hearing your views from up and down the country in the real world. Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle.
Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good evening, thank you for joining us. They brought me a glass of fizz. So this is how it is every Friday night. I don't think I can introduce that on my morning show, though. Right, privately educated pupils are more than twice as likely to go to university compared to comprehensive kids. We have people ripping their own teeth out at the moment because they can't access NHS dentists. And if you can't afford a Tesla, then you're going to have to pay to drive through certain cities with ULEZ. So is this country more and more divided by class than ever before? Ben Habib, it very much feels that way.
It does, and there's a really good reason why it feels that way, and I think it comes back to what we were talking about early on in the programme, about this desire to create equal outcomes as opposed to equal opportunities. And in the pursuit of equal outcomes, what the government has done is pursue an economic policy which is basically large state, lots of spending, interventionist policies, trying to level the playing field. And instead of creating an aspirational, ambitious working population, what we've got is a population that actually looks to the state for its protection every 5 seconds. You know, if there's something wrong, it's the state's problem. And when you do that, and you run that socialist model, which the Conservative government's done for the last 13 years, and Tony Blair before that, Gordon Brown and Tony Blair before that, you end up effectively with everyone feeling dependent on the state. And once that happens, you create a sort of underclass. And so in the pursuit of equal outcomes, what we've done is break what we already had learnt at vast cost in the 1980s was the right model, which is an aspirational Western capitalist Anglo-Saxon approach to life. And we need to find our way back to that. We need to create equal opportunities, not equal outcomes.
Do you trace it back to Tony Blair? I think I very much do.
I do, absolutely, Tony Blair. And, you know, who
has not gone away. Let's remember, he is still now working very hard on the globalist agenda that we know in Agenda 23. He's right there.
All the agendas which I oppose, he's at the heart of. And if you take any policy he promoted, you do the opposite, you'd probably be doing the right thing for the United Kingdom. And so I think the problem goes back to that. But, of course, what we've had in the last 15 years is inflation of around 35%, public sector wage growth of about 5 to 10% now. So we've had real deflation in public sector wages. You know, we talked earlier about whether it was fair or not to have 6% wage growth. Actually, whilst Zubi's absolutely right that we can't afford more, it's because the state has already spent far too much. But the reality is people are poorer.
And yet, how do you, therefore, Zubi, encourage the next generation to not just settle for being poorer and hoping that the government will give them a handout? Universal basic income's being trialled in Wales and also in England at the moment. How do we turn that computer off and reset it again?
That is a massive question.
Yeah.
It's very multifaceted. It's social, cultural, economic, political, familial, individual.
Educational, as we were talking about. Do you think that these... Sorry, just to interrupt you, just a bit, in terms of the education, private school children are going in much greater numbers than ever before to university compared to state school children. Is that the solution, though, in terms of a traditional university education? Because that was always what, you know, the poor aspired to. I put myself in that category, having been state educated. My parents were determined for me to go to university.
Yeah. The truth is the game has changed. And most people have not cottoned on to this fact. Simultaneously, as a university education has gotten more expensive, the value of a degree in real terms has actually declined, right? If you want to go into a STEM subject, you want to be an engineer, doctor, something like that, yes, you absolutely need a degree. But I think right now, and certainly in the future, the way that you're going to measure success, it's not going to be university degrees.
No.
No.
How do you measure it? How do you measure success now?
How do you measure success? I think it's, well, monetarily, I think it's the wealth you generate in the hours that you work. It's productivity, and we are falling behind dramatically in this country on productivity.
And health. We got wealth and we got health.
Health, wealth, happiness.
And you hanging out with Elon, you're going to also have a bit of wealth as well. Guys, thank you so much. I've come to the end. Ben Habib, Zubi, thank you very much. I will go away and drink the rest of my fears. I hope you have a lovely weekend. I'll be back on Monday morning with Andrew Pearce with Britain's Newsroom at 9:30. See you then.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening, my name's Rachel Ayres and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast brought to you by the Met Office. So it's been quite an unsettled, wet and miserable end to the week, and that isn't going to change much as we go through the weekend. It's all due to this area of low pressure that's going to be pushing northeastwards across the UK, and it's going to be bringing some pretty strong winds even as we go into tonight. But that rain that we've seen through much of Friday will start to clear away towards northern Scotland, but bringing some heavier bursts for eastern areas, so there could be some localised disruption there. Elsewhere, a drier night, maybe the odd shower, but with those strong winds, temperatures still remaining in the low teens. Now looking to the start of the weekend, and that rain will start to clear away from northern Scotland. A rash of showers developing across the rest of the UK. These could be heavy and thundery, and with some particularly strong winds as well. They'll be rattling from west to east throughout the day, though we might just see the odd more slow-moving shower across parts of Scotland. But in those strong winds, it's going to continue to be feeling unseasonably cool through Saturday. Looking ahead to Sunday, though, generally the better day of the weekend for many. There will be some persistent rain for a time across western parts of Scotland and the odd shower elsewhere, but a bit more in the way of sunshine and winds starting to ease as we go south to north. But looking ahead into the new week, and it will still remain unsettled, not so much as we've seen over the weekend, with temperatures at or below average.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people